You know, the history of tariffs is like this incredibly complex tapestry that weaves through time, from ancient civilizations to today's trade wars.
Yeah, it's fascinating how something as simple as a tax on imports can shape entire economies and even global stability. So, how did it all start?
Well, back in ancient times, civilizations like Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, and Rome taxed goods passing through their territories, mainly to
Right.
generate revenue. It wasn't really about economic policy then.
So, they were more about funding the government and less about protecting local industries.
Exactly. Tariffs were a primary source of income used to build infrastructure and maintain armies. But as we moved into medieval times, things started to shift a bit.
How so?
European kingdoms began imposing tariffs to protect local guilds and craftsmen from foreign
Oh,
competition,
interesting.
making trade more about protectionism.
So, tariffs evolved into a tool for economic strategy?
Exactly. They went from just collecting revenue to actually influencing trade policies
Yeah.
and controlling trade routes, like the Hanseatic League did in Northern Europe.
But didn't that make trade more expensive and inefficient?
Yes, it did. While tariffs protected local industries, they also made goods pricier and sometimes led to
Right.
conflicts over trade routes and taxation.
Sounds like a double edged sword.
Absolutely. Fast forward to the 1600s, we see the rise of mercantilism, where European powers used tariffs to limit imports and boost national wealth, often at the expense of their colonies.
Colonies like America back then?
Exactly. Colonies were forced to trade exclusively with their mother countries, creating
Yeah.
monopolies and stifling local economies.
That must have fueled a lot of resentment.
Oh, definitely. It's like having to buy all your groceries from one store that overcharges you
Right.
and doesn't let you shop around.
Not exactly a fair deal.
No, not at all. Then, in the 1800s, we have the Corn Laws in Britain, imposing high tariffs on imported grains to protect local farmers, but it led to higher food prices and hardship for the working class.
So the intention was to help farmers, but it hurt consumers?
Precisely. It's like trying to save one part of the economy
Yeah.
while another suffers, which shows the complex impact of tariffs.
It seems like tariffs often have unintended consequences.
They do. Take the US, for example. The tariff of 1816 was meant to protect budding industries,
Right.
and it did help industrialization.
But didn't tariffs also lead to trade wars?
Yes, especially with the Smoot-Hawley tariff in 1930. Intended to protect US jobs during the Great Depression, but it backfired spectacularly.
That's when other countries retaliated, right?
Exactly. They imposed their own tariffs, leading to a global trade war that worsened the economic crisis instead of
Right.
alleviating it.
So trying to save jobs ended up hurting the economy more?
Precisely. It's like putting up walls to keep the cold out, but accidentally trapping yourself inside with no
Yeah.
firewood, making things worse.
That's a vivid analogy.
Thanks. Moving on, after World War II, there was a push for free trade to prevent such disasters, leading to agreements like GATT in 1947.
And that eventually evolved into the World Trade Organization, right?
Exactly. The goal was to reduce tariffs worldwide and promote global
Yeah.
economic growth.
So free trade agreements have their benefits, but they've also faced criticism.
They have. While they boost economies and help developing countries export goods,
Right.
they can also lead to outsourcing and job losses in higher wage countries.
It's a tough balance to strike.
Definitely. And in recent times, we've seen the US-China trade war, where both countries imposed tariffs on billions of dollars of goods, trying to protect their interests.
Do you think those tariffs are effective?
Well, they aim to protect technology and jobs and reduce dependency on Chinese manufacturing,
Right.
but they also lead to higher prices for consumers and hurt exporters.
It's like a modern reflection of past tariff struggles.
Exactly. History tends to repeat itself. The tricky part is finding when tariffs work and when they backfire, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So when do tariffs actually work?
They can be effective in protecting new industries, allowing them to grow without being crushed by international competition and in matters of national security.
Like safeguarding essential industries.
Exactly. Reducing reliance on imports for critical goods like medicine or energy can be crucial.
Yeah, but when do they backfire?
When they trigger trade wars, leading to retaliatory tariffs that hurt all parties involved and raise
Right.
prices for consumers.
Also, domestic businesses can suffer if they rely on imported materials, right?
Exactly. It's like increasing the price of flour for a baker, their costs go up, and so do prices for everyone else.
That's a good point.
Then there's the ugly side, like historical trade disasters. The Smoot-Hawley tariff, for example,
Yeah.
which we mentioned earlier.
It seems that tariffs can have far-reaching consequences beyond what policymakers intend.
Absolutely. And that's why the future of tariffs and global trade is such a hot topic,
Right.
especially with current geopolitical tensions.
Do you think we're moving back towards protectionism?
It appears that way. Countries are reconsidering economic nationalism due to globalization concerns and the impacts of events like the pandemic.
But can tariffs and free trade coexist?
That's the million-dollar question. Some argue for a balanced approach, using tariffs strategically while promoting free trade
Yeah.
where possible to protect vital industries without isolating economies.
It's a delicate balance, that's for sure.
Indeed. Maybe the key is flexibility and international cooperation, rather than strict adherence to one policy or another.
I agree, but it requires a lot of diplomatic finesse.
Definitely. And perhaps learning from history can help us avoid past mistakes
Right.
and create more effective trade policies.
Speaking of which, I was wondering, don't you think that sometimes free trade can harm developing nations?
That's a valid point. Free trade can expose developing industries to overwhelming competition,
Yeah.
making it hard for them to grow.
So maybe in those cases, temporary tariffs could help?
Exactly. Protective tariffs, when used wisely, can nurture local industries until they're ready to compete globally, but timing and implementation are crucial.
It's clear that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Absolutely. Each country needs to assess its own economic landscape and
Right.
decide the best approach.
Well, this has been an enlightening discussion.
It really has. The history of tariffs shows us the complexity of global trade
Yeah.
and how careful we need to be with economic policies.
Agreed. Hopefully, policymakers can learn from the past to build a more stable economic future.
Let's hope so. It's like navigating a ship. You need to adjust the sails according to the winds to reach
Right.
your destination safely.
Well said. Thanks for sharing all these insights.
My pleasure. Always great to dive into history and economics
Yeah.
and see how they shape our world.
Definitely. Until next time.